Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. It is such an honor to be here to talk about the things that I've learned and I've seen that I cannot unsee as a journalist. I had no family that had issues here. I got into journalism. I was in journalism and started investigating stories and looking into what is known as medical kidnapping. I was the lead investigative reporter for medicalkidnap.com for more than 4 years, and what I've seen is shocking, it's devastating, and it is decidedly un-American. When I say the word medical kidnap, what we mean is children who are taken from their families for medical kinds of reasons, medical connections to the reason they're taken from their families, and generally by Child Protective Services. And I had no idea that human trafficking was connected. I learned that the majority of the children that are rescued from human trafficking come out of foster care. Foster care is a pipeline to human trafficking and child sex trafficking. Just some statistics that I've learned. According to the federal AFCARS report by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, less than 16% of children who are taken from their families are taken for any kind of reasons of abuse. Now, we think of Child Protective Services as designed to protect children from abuse, from child abuse. My impression as an American before I started this investigative work was that Child Protective Services only got involved if there were terrible parents who were abusing their children. That's what I thought it was for, and I think that is what the majority of Americans think that Child Protective Services is for. Less than 16% are taken for reasons of any kind of abuse. Only 17% of the allegations against parents end up being substantiated. And that's from the Children's Bureau of Child Maltreatment report from U.S. Health and Human Services. So allegations against parents saying that they've abused their children, only 17% of those are even substantiated. And that doesn't even mean that it's like a criminal conviction of guilty. That means that someone has decided and written down that it is substantiated. It can be based not on actual evidence. The exonerating evidence can be left out. I've investigated hundreds and hundreds of cases from all across America, and I've talked with more families than we've covered stories have come to us and talked to us about what's happened. And the thing is, when we investigate these stories, we're not just taking their story and listening to what they have to say. We're looking at the medical records. We're looking at the court documents. We're interviewing other people that are involved. We're looking at both sides of the issue, all sides of it, and we're looking and vetting these stories. And these children are being taken from parents who have done no wrong. Sometimes children have been taken for because their parents want a second medical opinion. Perhaps, and we've covered this, where the parent did not want their child to have major surgery that removes an organ without a second opinion, and they took her child. We've seen one of the things that I learned early on in this is the shocking, stunning reality that children who are wards of the state, children in the system, can legally be used as medical lab rats for medical drug testing, drug pharmaceutical research, medical research without their parents' knowledge or consent. Well, you say, how can that be? Because the Nuremberg Code after the Holocaust told us that there has to be informed consent. Well, they bypassed that by having social workers or judges sign off on consent in place of the family. So children are literally being taken for medical research. Children that are in foster care are much more likely to be given psychotropic drugs, medications. Even babies 2 and 3 years old are sometimes given cocktails of lots of medications, psychotropic medications, and they're able to be part of drug research. We've seen cases where we know that they've been directly involved in human trafficking, child sex trafficking. We've seen where children have been placed with child sex offenders. In fact, in Los Angeles, it was in the mainstream media a few years ago, there was a list of approved foster parents and another list of registered sex offenders. There were 1,000 names that were on both lists. Registered sex offenders who were approved, state-approved foster parents. I've seen a report where a child she was returned to her parents, it said human trafficking, that she had been human trafficked. Well, she wasn't human trafficked in her own parents' home. This happened under state care. So the vast majority of older kids in the foster care system or adoption system have been abused, but sexually molested. It is more common than not for an older child to have been molested in foster care. A child in foster care is at least 6 times more likely to be raped, abused, molested, or killed in foster care than if they were left in their own home. One of the things that I hear so much is that, well, why aren't I know these people who are truly abusive. They really are abusive, and Child Protective Services doesn't do anything about it. And here's what I've learned from whistleblowers, from social workers who have talked to us and told us what's really going on. Because of financial incentives from the federal government on the federal level, like the Adoption and Safe Families Act of 1997 and other federal streams of money, what they're looking for are children who are considered to be adoptable. Children who are truly abused and truly in need of intervention are considered by the system to be damaged goods who are unadoptable. That's the answer to why some of these kids are taken, or not taken, that should be taken. Laws are broken left and right. There are plenty of laws that would protect these children from the injustices, but they're broken left and right. I would dare say that I would be able to count the number of stories on one hand or less where there were no laws broken by people working for the state, for the government. So they're not being followed. There's not accountability. The federal incentives are creating an atmosphere where children can be taken from innocent families, just like you, just like me, without having done anything wrong. And they can be put into the hands of pedophiles, traffickers, or people who want to use them for medical drug research. And there's horror stories that we hear of, and we think they're anomalies. That's not the norm. Well, what I found out is that is the norm. It's more normal for this abuse to happen than it is for it not to be. But what happens is we get these reports and these federal reports and all these numbers that are sanitized. And yes, of course they have due process. Yes, of course they have an attorney. Yes, of course they have this, that, and the other thing that they're supposed to have. But that's not what's happening in reality. They're not really getting due process. They're getting attorneys that are court-appointed or even ones that they pay for that are not effective. They're not presenting exonerating evidence. It is really, really difficult all across the nation for any parent to find an attorney who is willing to truly fight for them and present the actual evidence. I cannot unsee the things that I've seen in the past 5 years. I've cried so many tears for families just like yours. I believe that if our Congress really knew what was happening, I believe that if President Trump really knew what was happening, he would do something about it to fix it. I see the side that you may not see. That side is the prevalent side. Listen to their voices, please.